Having decided, mythically or otherwise, that Cooperstown was indeed the home of baseball, the village proudly embraced its newfound fame. And one Cooperstown resident sought to capitalize on the town's distinction.
Stephen Clark was one of Cooperstown's leading citizens. In the 1930s, he was looking for ways for Cooperstown to thrive, and he developed art museums and history museums that are still housed in Cooperstown today.
But the best idea for a museum in Cooperstown came from one of his employees, Scotsman Alexander Cleland.
Alexander Cleland, being a creative thinker, sketched ideas down about how he would propose a museum in Cooperstown for baseball.
Cleland pitched the idea to Clark, and Stephen caught it. The next step was to seek the help of someone who could spread the word.
One of the most important things he did was get in touch with the new president of the National League, Ford Frick. He was a former sports writer, and he was able to help Cleland get the word out that a new baseball museum was being started.
But Frick then came up with an idea that would really put this museum on the map.
He thought maybe it should be more than just a museum, that perhaps we should think about electing people to this and calling it a Hall of Fame.
The concept was put into action, and while the building was being assembled, so was the first roster of inductees.
The first Hall of Fame election occurred in 1936, and it was actually two separate elections. The first election was conducted by the baseball writers, and they were to vote on those players post-1900. There was a separate election that was held by a veterans committee made up of quote-unquote old-timers, and they were to vote on players prior to 1900.
It seems simple enough, but the first vote didn't go very smoothly.
Back then, people were told to vote with almost no instruction. They weren't told whether players had to be retired or whether they had to be active. They were not instructed on terms of players whose careers split both the 19th and the 20th centuries.
Eventually, the voters made their decision and successfully elected the first ever Hall of Fame class. And the 5 men who received 75% of the vote were indeed at the head of the class.
Christy Mathewson was a gentleman. He was the first sports icon in America.
He was and still is one of the game's all-time great pitchers. His 373 victories are tied for 3rd all-time, and his performance in the 1905 World Series was stunning.
He pitched 3 games, won 3 games, and all of them were by shutouts.
Mathewson garnered 90% of the vote. Unfortunately, he had passed away years prior to the induction, but those who saw him pitch never forgot the exploits of the man they called the Christian gentleman.
He was one of the most beloved baseball players of all time.
If Mathewson set a standard for pitching greatness, the next inductee kept it right on track.
Walter Johnson, the durable big train, pitched 21 years for the same team, the Washington Senators.
The Big Train had 417 wins for the Washington Senators during his time of playing. That is 2nd all-time, only to Cy Young's 511.
The great Walter Johnson of the Washington Senators set many pitching records.
He also has the career record with 110 shutouts, which is truly amazing.
He was also the first man ever to reach 3,000 strikeouts. But despite those achievements, Johnson only received 83% of the vote, lowest among the original 5. Surprising, since many still regard him as the best pitcher ever.
Walter Johnson, the name means speed, power, control.
They called the next inductee the Flying Dutchman. He was also often referred to as baseball's greatest shortstop, a title many feel he still holds today.
Honus Wagner was the whole package. He was the 5-tool player. He was the Willie Mays at shortstop.
Wagner won 8 batting titles, and he batted 300 or over for 17 straight years.
Wagner drove in more than 1,700 runs in his career, and he stole more than 700 bases. He earned 95% of the Hall of Fame vote, 2nd highest among the 5 charter members.
This guy was quite a ball player. Nobody ever played the game better than Honus Wagner.
How revered was Wagner? Well, consider that his percentage of the vote was equal to the next inductee, a man who simply revolutionized the game.
The greatest home run hitter of all time, Babe Ruth, was a magical name.
We are talking about an era when major league leaders in home runs might be 13, 14, 15. Ruth out-homered most of the teams in the American League.
There it is. It's going, it's gone.
Babe Ruth invented modern baseball, and I think that's why he is the great sports icon that he is today.
714 times he made this familiar trot around the bases.
The honor of being part of the first class at Cooperstown was really important to him, a nice credential for him to carry around.
The greatest idol in American sports, the Bambino, Babe Ruth.
But as great as Ruth was, the final inductee in this first class was considered to be Hall of Fame worthy by even more of the voters.
Cobb, rated by many baseball authorities as the greatest player of all.
Cobb was a unique player and probably is as well known for how fierce he was and unrelenting he was as a hitter.
This cocky, confident attitude was typical of Ty. Cobb thought he could do anything.
His career batting average of .367 is still the highest ever. He has 12 batting titles. He had 23 straight seasons batting over 300. All those things are records.
He was baseball's greatest hitter.
With 98% of the vote, Cobb eclipsed the other inductees. And when that final vote was tallied, he finished just 4 votes shy of being unanimous.
Cobb got the most votes, 222 among the 5 of them. He beat out Babe Ruth. And that's how he was regarded by people who saw him play.
Cobb and Ruth were polar opposites, but though they exemplified different baseball styles, their greatness was beyond dispute. Thus, it was only appropriate that they led this first Hall of Fame class.
What they started, though, is a tradition that has meaning now and has woven itself into the spirit of the game itself. That's an amazing thing.
The acclaimed series that brings our national